Some state lawmakers in Wisconsin are taking home more money, while the state legislature is considering millions of dollars in budget cuts. Now, earlier this year, an assembly committee decided to pay members more when they spend the night in Madison. Fox 11 investigates, and Robert Hornacek found that in the future, those per diem rates could go up without even a vote.
When politicians are elected to the state legislature, they can receive health insurance, retirement benefits, and a salary of more than $50,000. But when they travel to Madison to represent their district, they get something extra. It's called a per diem, and it adds up to thousands of dollars a year.
In business, if you're traveling out of the area, your expenses are covered, and I don't think it's any different for the legislature.
Per diems are meant to cover lawmakers' expenses while they're in Madison on official business, things like food and lodging. Since 2001, the Senate and the Assembly paid the same rates. If a lawmaker lived in Dane County, they received $44 a day. Everyone else received $88 a day. That's still how the Senate operates, but earlier this year, the Assembly made a change. Now, when any member of the Assembly comes to Madison for the day, they can receive $69. For most, that means a drop of $19 for a day trip to the Capitol. But when they stay overnight, they can now get $138. That's an increase of $50. Lawmakers can claim a per diem for up to 153 days a year.
And it was kind of shocking because it wasn't as though during the election that people were begging their legislators to give themselves an increase.
Matt Rothschild is the executive director of the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign, a nonpartisan government watchdog group.
It was essentially their first order of business. They hadn't been in Madison long enough to dust off their chairs, and they gave themselves this boost.
So how did this happen, and who made the change? Just one assembly committee made up of 5 Republicans and 3 Democrats. All 8 voted for the measure. That's all that was needed for the policy change to take effect.
This is something Republican and Democratic lawmakers agree on.
Well, it's kind of amazing and sad that the only thing that they can agree on is giving themselves a boost.
It's important that people know that this did not increase anybody's budget.
Republican State Rep Jim Steineke from Kaukauna is the majority leader in the Assembly. He's on the committee that approved the new policy.
Some people look at it and say, wow, the first thing they did was they put more money in their own pockets.
Yeah, well, I mean, as legislators, we're always concerned about public perception. This isn't something that hasn't been contemplated over the last couple of years. I know we had talked about it last session as well. But the main goal that we want to ensure got accomplished in this is that legislators' actual costs were covered, but that also it didn't increase our budget at all, and we accomplished that.
The per diem rates haven't changed in more than a decade, and in that time, Steineke says expenses have gone up. The new rates are in line with an existing state law from 2001, which says per diems should be set at 90% of the rate for federal employees who travel to Madison. Despite that law, the state constitution allows each house to set its own rates. While Steineke acknowledges that budgets are tight, he says the Assembly did not add any money to its overall budget. Under the new policy, he says some lawmakers will get more money to cover their expenses and some will get less.
Do you think this was the right time to do this?
Yeah, I mean, again, if we're going to make sure that legislators aren't losing money coming down to Madison, we don't want to have elected representatives with a disincentive to come down to Madison and represent their people back home. You know, we want to make sure that their actual costs are covered and they're not losing money coming down to Madison.
Rothschild says it's not just about the money, it's about the principle.
Yeah, it's not so much how much it's going to cost the state of Wisconsin or us as taxpayers. It's just how hypocritical it is. They're giving themselves a raise and everybody else has to fend for themselves out in the cold.
What do you say to people who just on the face of this don't like it?
Well, I would just ask them if they think it's fair for their legislators to travel a couple hours down to Madison, stay overnight, and lose money in the process.
So now that the per diems for members of the state assembly are tied to that federal reimbursement rate, the next time it goes up, there won't even be a vote by a committee here in Madison. That's because whenever the federal rate goes up, the rate for members of the assembly will also go up. In Madison, I'm Robert Hornacek, Fox 11 News.
The Assembly is planning to review this new policy after 6 months.